Let's open up the mailbag here. We know that there's a lot of different questions people have, and we wanted to start out with, we know some of the things that people are talking about, what's going on with the outfield situation. So Brandon asks, David Lowe or Cedric Hunter?
Well, Brandon's referring to the battle for who will fill in for Arencibia and Cody Ashley, being that both of them are out with injuries. And right now it's kind of a toss-up. The Phillies brought both David Lowe and Cedric Hunter into Major League camp as a non-roster invitee. Both have done some things pretty well, so right now it's still probably not yet decided. But when I wrote the mailbag, both went into play yesterday, both batting .308, both providing some pretty good defense. And it's kind of a toss-up. You get a little bit of more of a on-base guy with David Lowe. David Lowe has some Major League experience. He's played for the Kansas City Royals, and he's played for the Baltimore Orioles. So he has more Major League experience. Cedric Hunter got a cup of coffee with the San Diego Padres back in 2011, basically as a defensive replacement. And I think he actually got to bat in 4 games and 4 at-bats total. So Lowe is a little bit more polished at this point in terms of Major League ability. We know he can hit. He's a career .255 hitter in the Major League. So he might be considered the surer bet. But on the other hand, one thing that Hunter has showed that Lowe necessarily hasn't is a little bit more power. So if the Phillies feel they're short on power with the loss of Altair, who could maybe have hit you 15 or 20, they might consider going for Hunter instead.
So look at the Phillies starting pitching situation. I know there's a lot of conjecture about Jeremy Hellickson being the opening day starter, Aaron Nola being the 2, but the 5th slot is still open. Lauren asks, why not Adam Morgan for that 5th slot?
Yeah, I mean, Adam Morgan came up and was pretty impressive last season when you consider that he wasn't really tabbed to do much of anything. He peaked as the Phillies' number 5 prospect when he wasn't hurt yet, but after he had shoulder surgery and recovered from that, he really was a bit of a nice surprise last season. That said, I mean, he was a 5-7 pitcher with an ERA over 4.5, which around 4.5, which isn't mind-blowing numbers, but he did a very much admirable job, and I think that he really has earned some consideration. But the problem is the long-term projections. What's better for the Phillies? He might not be ahead of Vincent Velasquez in that regard. If the Phillies feel they absolutely have to develop Velasquez because he deserves that shot because they feel he's going to be a key member of the rotation going forward, well, then he might edge out Morgan. My solution for Lauren's question is that you give Adam Morgan a good look in the Phillies bullpen. The Phillies don't really have a clear left-handed reliever. If you look back to who was with the club last year, Elvis Araujo, he's pitched kind of so-so in the major league level and even this spring. And Mario Hollins is still recovering from his Tommy John surgery. So really there is no well-known left-handed quantity in the bullpen. Rule 5 pick Daniel Stumpf might be it. But perhaps that's a way that Morgan can help the Phillies because they really don't have any left-handed arms. And if Morgan is further down on the depth chart of who might be in the Phillies rotation long-term, well, then maybe you give him a shot in the bullpen.
We're opening up the Phillies mailbag with our Phillies insider Frank Klose here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Rich asks, does J.P. Arencibia have a shot at the Phillies opening day roster?
Well, I would say his shot's better than it was when spring started, but I think his situation still remains the same. They signed him to be catching depth that they could stash at AAA. Now, if you look at the Phillies' young catching prospects, they certainly have some, the 2 big ones being Jorge Alfaro and Andrew Knapp. But you also have Gabriel Lino, who might be a helpful major league catcher someday, maybe not necessarily the level that Knapp and Alfaro are projected by some to be, but you really don't want to impede their development. Now, the Phillies got ridiculously lucky last year. They had 0 days on the disabled list from their catching tandem of Cameron Rupp and Carlos Ruiz. That's pretty remarkable when you figure the wear and tear that a catcher gets behind the plate every day. So since they got lucky last year, I think they realized they were lucky last year, and they brought in Arencibia to be somebody that they could keep at AAA. He can play some other positions. He can play first base for them. He can serve as a designated hitter. He can dazzle Iron Pigs fans by hitting some home runs. And then he's there in case they need to go grab a catcher, because Carlos Ruiz is 37 years old. Cameron Rupp, nice player who's done pretty well, but he wasn't necessarily projected to be a major league starter. But so if you have an injury to either of them, Arencibia is the one that they're probably going to go grab.
Following up on the Phillies catching situation, it seems like there was a point in time the Phillies had almost no depth at the catching position, and now it seems like they have this massive surplus. Obviously, they're preparing for the day when they no longer have Carlos Ruiz's contract to deal with. But when that day comes, is there a guy that they're looking at, that they're going to say this is the guy we're definitely going to go with in the future, or they're going to just let things play out instead?
Well, I think there's still some that has to play out. Certainly, Andrew Knapp has been very impressive with his bat in the last 12 months. He sort of caught fire rather quickly. And Jorge Alfaro, Pete Buchanan, said this week that he has the best arm he might have ever seen on a catcher. So the Phillies certainly have two really good-looking options. Now, one thing about prospects is that that's all they are. They're prospects. Maybe they fall apart along the way. After all, I think a few years ago in a much controversial trade, when the Phillies traded Hunter Pence, they traded Hunter Pence with the idea that they were getting their next starting catcher back in Tommy Joseph, and those concussions can really kill somebody's career, and that's exactly what happened. So we need to be mindful of that, because a couple of years ago, Tommy Joseph was in spring training. He was hitting over 300. He looked really good. Those head injuries are, as we know very well from watching the NFL, they're really nothing that you can mess with. So you never know what's going to happen to sort of derail somebody's trajectory as a prospect. And hopefully that doesn't happen to either Alfaro or Knapp. I mean, if we lose one of them and one of them works out, that's still pretty good in terms of the return on what your potential prospects will give you. But right now there's really no clear winner. I think they're going to send Andrew Knapp to AAA to play every day. They're going to send Jorge Alfaro to AA to play every day. And hopefully they force them to make a decision. If both are playing very well, you might see somebody pick up a first baseman's mitt or an outfield mitt, and maybe they can help the team in another way.
Also, I wanted to ask you, Frank, about the situation with Odubel Herrera. It looks like that he says he's on track to be definitely a go for opening day, but manager Pete Mackinnon seems to be a little bit more concerned with the injury than Herrera is.
Yeah, there is reason for concern. We had on our website, Philadelphia, last week, one of our writers picked up on the fact, Matt Rappa, he picked up on the fact that Odubel Herrera had made a Snapchat story, a picture of Herrera holding up his middle finger wrapped in a bandage. And in Spanish, it basically said, "My poor little finger." So the Phillies didn't really say much about it. And they sort of led us to believe that everything was going okay because the x-rays were negative. But as you might be well aware, sometimes the joints take a while to heal when they get inflamed. And it seems like he's got some inflammation, and that's it. But certainly you don't, at this point in spring training, want to sort of rush him. So I think they're going to try to hold off as much as they can before they really let him play, but I do think they believe that he'll be okay. There is no spring and there is no break, but definitely concerning. If anything else, it's giving them some time to give some extra attention to some of the outfielders you were just talking about, because David Lowe has played some center field in recent games, and Cedric Hunter, by trade, has played more games in center field than any other position in his minor league career. So we hope that he'll be back by next week. It seems like he's on track for next week. Until we hear otherwise, it does sound like that's probably going to work out okay. But again, it's spring training, so you really don't have to force the issue.
97.3 ESPN.com Phillies insider Frank Klose joining us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Frank, before we let you go, I wanted to ask you about the closer situation with Hernandez having a tendonitis, not being able to throw for a while, it seems like right now it's Andrew Bailey's potential closer job to lose. Could we potentially see a situation where Bailey makes the roster as the closer, then Hernandez is maybe like the setup man?
Well, we'll see. Andrew Bailey recorded his first blown save today. Now, it wasn't a ninth-inning save situation, but he did give up the lead today. He gave up 3 runs, so now he took the loss today. So now he's got a 2-1 record, but overall he's pitched pretty well. I think it won't be a matter of how many runs the guy gives up in spring training. I think they're going to look and see whose velocity is up there, who has good movement on their pitches, and they'll probably make a decision in that regard more so than what somebody's spring numbers are. Hernandez pitched pretty well yesterday. He seems to be getting back on track. I mean, he was the first reliever out of the pen yesterday, so they haven't put him into these high leverage situations yet, but I still think he could go either way. I think Bailey still has a chance to make the Phillies bullpen, but as you know, the more that they pitch, the more likely they are to give up a few runs. And today, Bailey did give up a few runs. So I know after a few good outings, you almost want to anoint him the closer. But the spring training is pretty long, and the season's only longer. So as much time you can to evaluate the situation you can, and we'll see. I mean, they could pitch Bailey tomorrow, and he gives up 3 more runs. Try to pitch him on back-to-back days. Or he could come in there and shut them down, just like and make it look like that he's able to rebound and pitch, from day to day. So maybe they'll consider him, but still kind of early to make that final determination.
Frank, appreciate you coming on, opening the mailbag with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one, Josh.